You're going to start on me. Hey folks, Roland Martin here. This is Roland Martin Unfiltered, broadcasting live from the campus of Texas Southern University in Houston. We are 4 days away from Election Day, and all around the country, candidates, they are focused on getting as many people out to vote as possible. I, of course, was on the campus with Black Votes Matter as they were taking students to the polls as well, so we'll actually show you some of that. Also, Donald Trump and President Barack Obama, both of them on the campaign trail. Obama not afraid to fire back at Donald Trump. We'll tell you about that as well. Plus, Michael Cohen, Trump's former attorney, he is out saying that Trump often made racist comments to him when they were talking to each other. Shocker. Shocker. We'll talk about that as well on the show, folks. It is a packed show. We can't wait to break it all down for you as we broadcast live from TSU. It's time to bring the funk and roll about unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
All right, folks, glad to be with you as we are broadcasting live from the Student Center here on the campus of Texas Southern University and HBCU right here in Houston, Texas. And so glad to be here 4 days away from Election Day, and folks are focused on getting out as many votes as possible. We're going to start the show a little bit different. So, of course, we were going to begin the show talking about the Georgia voter case. We're going to do that in just 1 second. But as we were setting up about 9 minutes ago, I look out to my right, and all of a sudden I see some crimson and gold walking. I said, is that the Jack Yates High School band? And so folks are like, yeah, it is, of course. I'm a graduate of Jack Yates, right across the street from TSU. And while they're tearing down the old campus after building a new one, the band is here practicing on the TSU campus. And so what the heck? We might as well go ahead and start the show off, talk about bringing the funk with the band playing Little of a Man, Lil Duval's song, Living My Best Life. Y'all ready? Okay, hit it. All right, then. I appreciate it. All right, JY, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. All right, time to get to practice. Go. All right, then. Again, so look, when it's your show, you can do that. It's your high school. And so glad to have, of course, the JY Band join us. And if you might hear us, you might hear in the distance, that's the Ocean of Soul actually practicing as well. That, of course, is the TSU Band. All right, let's get right to it, folks. In Georgia, a federal judge ruled today that Georgia's exact match rules for voter registration will not apply for Tuesday's election. That will allow people to vote who had their voter registration held up. The Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, they, of course, were part of a coalition that filed a suit against Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who is a Republican running for governor of Georgia. Of course, the Lawyers Committee, they also are managing a war room to combat last-minute attempts at voter suppression. Joining us right now is Dorian Spence. He is the Director of Special Litigation and Advocacy for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Dorian, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Roland?
I'm doing great. First and foremost, I mean, look, you guys have been targeting so many different people, taking them to court. Our civil rights lawyers are critically important. And it amazes me, I keep having all these black Republicans come on the show denying voter suppression. But the reality is what you see in Georgia and other places, Republicans desperately want to decrease voter turnout to make it easier for them to win. And this case is a huge victory for the Lawyers Committee and the other groups in the coalition.
Absolutely. And this case doesn't just start this year. It actually goes back to 2014 when Stacey Abrams put together a nonprofit that the sole purpose was to register 100,000 African-American and low-income people to vote. And we saw back then 50,000 of those people didn't make it onto the rolls. What we found out during our investigation was that minor discrepancies on their voter registration applications were bumping them from the system. So they got caught in this no man's land of pending on their voter registration status. Today, a judge on a similar issue found that 3,000 people were trapped in that same issue of pending status. And he basically said that they will be able to vote in this election.
And look, I mean, this is critical because this thing has been going back and forth when it comes to these folks. And of course, he has been saying, "Oh, look, this is just standard." But the reality is, what he did in this case, he tried this same crap in the last election, was slapped down by a federal judge, and the legislature, they actually made it law.
Right. Right. And we see these attacks on the right to vote, the fundamental rights to vote across the country. This isn't the only state that's trying suppressive tactics. We see it in Ohio with secretaries of states purging the rolls of eligible voters just because they've been inactive for one election cycle. We see it in Texas where there are voting machines switching the votes of eligible voters. We saw it in North Carolina. We just heard today, Roland, in North Carolina, a glitch in the computer system almost kicked 400 voters off the rolls. We have to understand that the precious right to vote is under attack at every turn, And it just so happens, and you know as well as I do, when I say just so happens, I say that sarcastically, that it most often affects people of color, people from our community. So we have to stay ever vigilant. We have to make sure that we know our status before election season, and even throughout election season, make sure that we stay engaged and exercise our right to vote.
Dorian, let's talk about this war room. Exactly what does it entail, and what are you looking for between now and Election Day?
Absolutely. So the Lawyers Committee spearheads a coalition of organizations, civil rights organizations, civic engagement organizations called Election Protection. And we have been active for the past 14 years with recruiting volunteers, both legal and non-legal, to protect the fundamental right to vote. Now, when we talk about protecting the fundamental right to vote, we don't just mean for black people, we don't just mean for white people, we mean for everyone. If you are eligible to cast a ballot, we will do everything in our power to make sure that you cast that ballot on Election Day. And what that looks like is that we have field programs in 28 states. We have over 6,000 volunteers across the country, and we have over 1,000 trained attorneys on the phone waiting for your call if you run into problems on Election Day. That problem could be as small as, I don't know where my polling location is, or I can't remember if I'm registered to vote, to something as big as, I know that I'm registered to vote, I have my voter registration card, and they still won't let me vote. We have rapid response programs or infrastructure in place to get to the bottom of all of those problems. So for all of your viewers, if you run into problems either on Election Day or even now, you can call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Once again, that's 1-866-OUR-VOTE to get help. And we introduced a little wrinkle this year. We also have a text feature as well. If you run into problems at the polls, either now through Election Day, you can text 97779 to get the help you need.
All right, then, Dorian, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for all the hard work for the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law.
Absolutely, Roland. It's always a pleasure.
All right, I want to bring in my panel right now. Brandon Cooper, chairman of the Prince George's County Republican Party. Also joining us, Dr. Cleo Monago, social political analyst and activist, who I call super black. And Brandon, I want to start with you. Certainly, look, we talked about this beforehand. If you're Brian Kemp, you're not happy with what took place here. But this also should be a rebuke to those legislators in Georgia who actually made this law. This is an utterly ridiculous law, and it's the kind of crap Republicans keep doing in the southern states to have to, of course, put in effect voter suppression.
Yes, I don't know where to begin, Roland. First off, I want to say and echo what you said about the Lawyers Committee. I want to echo the good work that they're doing, because there's no doubt that there's shenanigans being played across the country in elections. And you mentioned earlier in your remarks that you have a series of black Republicans who come across who deny voter suppression exists. Let me make it very clear, I'm not one of those people. I do recognize that there are some issues, particularly in North Carolina, which I just don't agree with, and it's horrible. But just going back to Georgia, my friend, you talk about how they're putting up barriers to voting. As you know, as I mentioned before, Georgia has a record amount of voter registration now than ever in the history of Georgia under the Republicans' Secretary of State. Again, I don't know Brian Kemp, not defending him, but I'm just pointing out the facts. Also, Georgia is one of only 13 states that has automatic voter registration. This is like the crown jewel that Democrats have been trying to pass across the country. And Georgia is one of the few states that has automatic registration so that you're automatically registered to vote, making it easier to vote when you go to the DMV. And so you're characterizing, you're cherry picking these incidences, trying to make it seem like, you know, Georgia in 2018 is Georgia of the Jim Crow era when Democrats actually stopped blacks from voting. But that's not what's taking place in Georgia. Going to the decision that was made today, it just came out, as you mentioned, it's about 40 pages.
Brandon.
You want me to get, okay.
Brandon.
Yeah, where we at?
Brandon.
Roland.
This is the problem that I keep trying to explain to you Republicans.
Okay.
Which is a problem. You put barriers in place. Black people are going to leapfrog those barriers, but we shouldn't have to be leapfrogging the barriers. And so you're using the same argument Supreme Court Justice Roberts did when he said, "Oh, well, black voter turnout has dramatically changed, so we don't need Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act."
That's not the same argument.
The reason you have high black turnout is because of Section 4
so
and the Voting Rights Act.
registration is a barrier to black votes. Please explain that, Roland. You never talk about that. So automatic
first of all,
registration, which
that's a
Democrats
good
are
thing.
pushing for nationwide, is somehow a barrier to black
Why
votes?
should
Come on now.
Republicans?
Come on now.
Why
Come on
should
now.
Republicans? Hold up. Why? Okay, Brandon.
Is that,
Are
I mean, you wanna
Republicans
talk about it
pushing
now?
same-day
You
voter
wanna jump
registration?
over it or no? Are you going to respond to that one
No,
point?
I'm asking you a question.
Okay. Ignore my
I'm asking you a question. First of all, it's a good thing. My question is this here. Do you as a Republican, do you support automatic voter registration and same-day voter registration?
Yes and yes. Yes and yes.
Good.
What I
You're
can say-
one of
let
the
me go
few
back- let me
ones,
go back.
Cleo.
Oh, yeah, you go over my
No,
point.
hold up. I got to
All
go
right.
to Cleo.
All right.
Cleo, go ahead.
Well, all I can say is I learned something today that I didn't know before. As you know, on your show, I've complained about us not anticipating voter repression because it's been happening for years. And I just met Dorian from the Lawyers Committee, and apparently working with Stacey Abrams, they've been dealing with this issue or trying to deflect the possibility of voter repression at least since 2004, or maybe. So that's really impressive for me to hear because, as I've said many times before, this is old news. They did it way back when George W. Bush and before that in terms of black people being repressed. But it's good to hear that Stacey Abrams is so focused that she worked on this issue years ago and has made, I think that might be part of why she's doing so well now. Like I said before, her ground game in Georgia is one of the most powerful ones I've ever seen before. So this sister is quite brilliant and has great vision. So it's good to meet you, Dorian. It's good to hear about the work that you're doing.
Again, folks, first of all, we are here in Texas. A lot of things, of course, happening here. We look at the latest polls. Beto O'Rourke is down by about 3 points to Ted Cruz. They're campaigning. O'Rourke is in Texas, in Dallas. This weekend, on Monday, is going to be doing, actually, an event with Kelly Roland, formerly of Destiny's Child. I have no idea what Ted Cruz is doing with black people because I haven't seen it with black people, which is no shock. So I have no idea what's going on there. But again, I mean, I haven't. I haven't seen him doing anything with black people. And of course, this whole caravan issue is something that's also that's going on, that's taking place. And of course, Donald Trump is making a big deal out of this. It came up in his rally today. Also, President Barack Obama had his rally in Miami as well. And so it's, again, all kind of different stuff that's been happening when it comes to this election. As we get down to these final 4 days, Brandon, I got to ask you, how much sense does it make to hear Donald Trump say, oh, my goodness, the pipe bomber and the guy who killed 11 people at a Jewish synagogue broke his momentum?
Yeah.
Dude, really?
I think in your oxymoron, we're using
How
Donald Trump
sick
and
and
sense
offensive is that?
The same
Mostly a
sentence.
moron.
Yeah, using that in the same sentence is part of the problem. So again, as he's been since before he ran for office, as he is now, Donald Trump is his biggest enemy. I can't explain or defend anything he says, and that's never been my job, never will do. But I will point out, that some of the issues, I guess, as far as you talk about the caravan, I think that is a big issue that people care about. My mother is I don't want to put her on blast, but she's a lifelong Democrat. And she called me as well, kind of saying that, I kind of agree that we have to have some type of borders here, just like every other country. We just can't let people cross the border without any restrictions, which is not happening, but which is kind of in the discussion right now. But back to your point about Trump, he says a lot of crazy things. Also, the thing about Stacey Abrams, again, talking about her being unqualified. Again, it's one of those things that's not needed. It's I guess it's going towards his base. Don't know why he continues to put his foot in his mouth. But Stacey Abrams, as Dr. Cleo mentioned, is running one of the strongest campaigns, not just, particularly in the South, but across the nation right now. And having Oprah on her side is definitely making things pretty interesting come Tuesday.
Dorian, it has to be offensive again. I mean, here you have people in Pittsburgh who are mourning. 11 folks in a synagogue killed. You have 2 former presidents targeted by this pipe bomber.
Right.
12 different devices, a vice president, 2 first ladies. I can go down the line.
Right.
100 other people, including journalists, were on the target list of this guy.
Right.
And Trump says, damn, my momentum was broken.
Right. Yeah, we have someone who is deeply unconcerned with the welfare of people, quite frankly. And he finds wedge issues to bring up to soak his base. And we're within 7 days of an election. So he's going to keep focused on himself and focused on these wedge issues. And just 2 days ago, and it seems like weeks ago at this point, he actually floated the idea of rolling back birthright citizenship by way of an executive order. And that's something that should be deeply offensive to everybody, but particularly African Americans, simply because the issue of birthright citizenship came out by way of the 14th Amendment, which was basically ratified to secure citizenship for the descendants of African Americans, for the descendants of slaves. It was ratified to specifically address the ruling in the Dred Scott case in the 1800s, which basically said that black people who are the descendants of slaves are not full citizens of the United States. So we deal with these issues day to day, and we have someone in the White House who is deeply unconcerned with black and brown people, specifically and low-income people as well. But we, once again,
let's talk about another court case, and that is coming out of Ohio, where several federal judges have ordered Ohio to allow voters who've been purged in the last 6 years to be able to cast a provisional ballot in this year's election. You might remember this case went all the way to the Supreme Court, where a white man in Ohio sued, saying that he was improperly purged because he did not vote in a previous election. The Supreme Court, the conservative Supreme Court, with Neil Gorsuch on the court, voted 5-4 that purging was allowed, which is one of the reasons why Republicans across the country have been doing this very same thing. Now, plaintiffs, led by the A. Philip Randolph Institute, got the appeals court to overturn an October 10th ruling by a federal judge that said voters were not illegally purged from Ohio's rolls. And so that is happening. And speaking of provisional ballots, Keegan Peele and Chris Rock, they got together to actually put this video together to help people out when it comes to the idea of casting a provisional ballot. Check this out.
Hi, I'm Keegan Michael Key, and I'm here to talk to you about the importance of voting this November 6th. You know, no matter who you are, it's important. Hi, I'm Keegan Michael Key, and I'm here to talk to you about the importance.
They know who you are.
Okay.
Go.
That you
Cut.
have
More passion.
passion. Sorry. No matter who you are, or where you're from, or what political party you're affiliated with, it's important that
Come on. What are you doing? Go.
Here we go.
Run it.
Here we go. There are efforts underway across America right now to keep certain groups from voting.
Groups? What groups you talking about?
No.
Stop with the groups.
I don't
New
know.
Kids on the Block? Spice Girls? Groups?
No, I'm talking about, the disenfranchised.
Disenfranchised? What, people that own Popeyes? What are you talking about?
Black people. Brown
Well, then say black
people.
people.
Right, okay. Black people. They're trying to keep black people from voting.
There you go.
They can't tell you can't vote, okay? You have the right to act.
All right, then. And so that's certainly quite a funny video there. Let's talk about, of course, this whole idea of qualifications, who should run. Donald Trump has been praising Ron DeSantis, who is running in Florida, as saying that he's a top student at Yale and Harvard Law School, be a great governor. But then, of course, he blasted Stacey Abrams, saying she is not qualified to be the governor of Georgia. Really? Really? Let me help you out, Donald. Stacey Abrams graduated magna cum laude from Spelman College, master's degree from the University of Texas. I don't really talk about them. Okay, law degree from Yale Law School, and also the minority leader of the Georgia General Assembly. Brandon, sounds to me like one hell of a qualified black woman.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I said earlier, I think this whole issue, what's qualified, it reminds me a little bit what happened with Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama during 2008 primary. As you remember, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton came out saying that Barack Obama was not qualified, that just a few years ago he would be getting coffee for Bill Clinton. And so I hate this idea that they're putting qualifications on folks. I mean, looking at our current president, Donald Trump, compared to other presidents, he's on paper, you would say maybe the least qualified of the presidents we've had. But I think if you look at the Georgia Constitution, it says you have to be 30 years old, you have to be a resident of the state, I think, for 6 years, and a U.S. citizen for 15 years, something like that. So I think that makes her qualified. She's running. Let the voters decide on Tuesday whether she's qualified to run the state. And again, I think Donald Trump continues to be as big as enemy. It may work for a certain segment of his base, but it's not working for a majority of us.
Cleo.
We already know who Donald Trump is. He's been consistently strange and antagonistic and has a resistance to facts set before he became president. I think it's important, though, to understand, because we keep talking about Trump, but Trump is a figurehead who's sitting in front of a large group of people who support him, including some of the masses of the United States of America. It's not just Trump. I believe that Trump probably goes to the Klan committee first, the high executive level of the Klan in the White House, and they all plan to make a decision that he's making. He's not alone. But again, with him saying that Abrams is not qualified, come on, that's what we expect him to do and expect him to say. He's been predictable. That's why I get kind of surprised by people's perpetual being surprised by the man redundantly being Trump from day one. The man has not changed a bit, so this is to be expected. I don't believe he believes everything that he says. I don't believe that he believes that Stacey Abrams is not qualified, but he's playing psychological games. He's throwing that perspective into the mix so people can consider it, and his hope is that they will not vote for her because he says she's not qualified. And frankly, that kind of deceptive perspective has worked for him. It's worked.
Dorian?
The Lawyers Committee is a nonpartisan organization. We want to make sure that anyone who is eligible to cast a ballot on Election Day can cast a ballot. So if you run into problems at the polls on Election Day, dial 1-866-R-VOTE. We're here to help you out.
Hey, Dorian, you ain't got that. Dorian, you can be nonpartisan, but you can at least say the sister's qualified.
Listen,
you ain't got to run from the question.
Let me work my way back to that, because I met Stacey Abrams in person in 2014. I thought she was a very charming woman who was very focused, and I have to commend anyone who sees that there's a large segment of the state population who is not registered to vote, and she doesn't just sit back from her podium and tell people to go out and register to vote. She actually does something about it. She put together a nonprofit, and she got out there and she registered voters. That is 100% commendable. I think the questions of her qualifications are a non-issue. She's clearly qualified. She's clearly one of the most brilliant people in the four corners of the state of Georgia. So, I mean, that's beside the point for me. What I'm saying, and I want to be clear about this, is that if voters run into problems on Election Day, you can dial 1-866-R-VOTE. We will get you the help you need.
We got you. Dorian, I'm going to get a number. I got it. But stick to the topic at hand. All right, y'all. As I said, I'm here in the campus of Texas Southern University, and earlier today, Black Votes Matter. They actually were on campus. They brought their bus, which has been traveling all across the country, mainly in the South, to help students get to the polls. And, of course, this is one of their hoodies. Y'all know normally I don't like hoodies, but this is one of their hoodies. That video here, of course, we shot earlier. Also, the students from the Texas Southern University School of Communications were working with me as well, and so they shot some of that video as well. And, of course, that's the students getting off the bus, entering the polling location. They, of course, were taking students back and forth all day to the polling location, which was located about a mile or so away. I still don't understand. Well, first of all, I understand because we're living in a state run by Republicans, why you don't have an early voting location on the TSU campus, considering how close you are to so many people here. And so it makes no sense whatsoever. The same thing happened when I was at North Carolina A&T on Sunday. Same thing. Those students had to actually march 2 miles away just to vote. And so we caught up with some of these students and shared their thoughts on why voting is important.
I believe it's important to vote because our ancestors, they died for this right for us to vote. And I just feel like it's a slap in their face when I hear other young African Americans saying that, you know, our vote doesn't matter. It matters. So that's why I think it's important to vote, just to pay homage to our ancestors.
Basically, to pick out what she said, it's definitely a huge slap in our face to our ancestors, grandmothers, grandfathers that wasn't allowed the right to vote, wasn't allowed certain privileges that we're allowed today. Also, I just feel like especially this certain election is very important because this certain election, it affects us directly as the people. And we got to make sure we get the right people in office to make sure that things are handled right, especially in the White House, and just try to do the best we can to make this country better.
And I think it's important for us to vote, especially right now, because these elections are what's going to affect us in the community instead of like the presidential election, which is going to affect us as a whole, as like a city. So what we're doing right now is going to affect us, what we're doing in the community and our surrounding areas.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcus Nash. I'm a junior here at Texas Southern University, majoring in education. I feel it's important to exercise your vote because when you vote, you're planning the future for your unborn kids, and also you're electing the people that's governing everything that's around you, from state to local to the executive level. And I feel like it is very important for you to exercise that vote.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Eggleston. I'm the aquatics director, and I believe that it's important to vote not only to be an example for my students and my staff, but also to exercise my right to stand up for the things that I believe in.
Hey, what are we going to do? Vote! Who are we?
TS, 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 you. I thought you knew.
All right, folks. Now, today in Miami, President Barack Obama was there campaigning on behalf of Andrew Gillum, who is running for governor. Latest polls show he's up almost 4 points against Ron DeSantis. Also campaigning for Senator Bill Nelson, locked in a tight battle for the U.S. Senate. Nelson is the incumbent. He's running against Florida Governor Rick Scott, who's trying to become the United States Senator. Here's what Obama had to say at today's rally.
So America's at a crossroads. The health care of millions is on the ballot. Making sure working families get a fair shake is on the ballot. But maybe most of all, the character of our country is on the ballot. In the closing weeks of this election, we have seen repeated attempts to divide us with rhetoric designed to make us angry and make us fearful. It's designed to exploit our history of racial and ethnic and religious division that pits us against one another, to make us believe that order will somehow be restored if it just weren't for those folks who don't look like we look, or don't love like we love, or pray like we do. So, it's an old playbook. It's one that the powerful and the privileged turn to whenever control starts slipping away. They'll get folks riled up just to protect their power and their privilege, even when it hurts the country, even when it puts people at risk. It's as cynical as politics gets. But in 4 days, Florida, you can reject that kind of politics.
All right, folks, going to a break right now, and we're going to show you a couple of great PSAs that are trying to get young folks, millennials, and Gen Z to go to the polls and vote. And we'll show you those, and we'll be back on Roland Martin Unfiltered, live from the campus of Texas Southern University in the greatest city in the world, Houston, Texas. Back in a moment.
All the young people who are here today, there are now more eligible voters in your generation than in any other. Which means your generation now has more power than anybody to change things. But to exercise that clout, to exercise that power, you have to show up. In the last midterms election, in 2014, fewer than 1 in 5 young people voted. 1 in 5. Not 2 in 5. Or 3 in 1 in 5. Is it any wonder this Congress doesn't reflect your values and your priorities? Don't tell me your vote doesn't matter.
Hi, I'm an actual doctor. Are you feeling tired, irritable, and stressed out about government and the state of democracy? Well, you might consider voting. Voting is shown to relieve the painful symptoms of civic constipation and electile dysfunction in the voting populace.
I used to think politics wasn't my thing, pretending like my inactive citizenship wasn't bothering me.
I couldn't stop putting up signs on my lawn, my bumper, even my own body.
Voting works to treat my moderate to severe gets and chronic apathy.
Voting is proven 100 times more effective
than posting on social media,
praying for the apocalypse,
cynicism, hopelessness, or
moving to Canada.
If you're an American 18 and over, voting is recommended for you. Side effects may include being able to better justify your existence, the ability to look your kids in the eye, decrease thoughts of suicide, and sleeping.
So if you suffer from electile dysfunction,
civic constipation,
ask your doctor.
Ask your doctor.
Then voting is right for you.
If you or somebody you know suffers from electile dysfunction, become a healthy voter today at voterx.org.
Pull out. Oops. All right, folks. Again, those were pretty interesting PSAs, and so we want to do this right now. So I want to talk about that. So a couple of students from TSU here. I want to ask them a couple of questions about that. So y'all, come on, step over. Here we go. All right. So double check. Hold that. Just talking to the mic. Hopefully that is working just fine. First of all, what's your name?
Rebecca Edwards.
Rebecca Edwards, and you are?
Ashley Johnson.
All right then. So we just ran this PSA that basically was saying that millennials have got to stop whining, complaining, and I'm so sick I can't vote. What do you make again these low numbers when you have the largest group now, bigger than baby boomers, but they're not voting their power?
I would definitely say that when it comes down to like voter ID restrictive laws, I think that pushes away a lot of millennials from voting because they feel like their vote doesn't count. Especially here in Texas, I think it was in 2013 when they passed the law about, voter ID laws and picture IDs and things of that matter. It turned a lot of people my age away from saying that, well, I don't have the right ID or I'm not from Houston, so I don't know if I can really vote in this election. And so they feel very discouraged in going out to vote because they feel like they can't.
But there's a placard at the National Civil Rights Museum that says, all I want for my 18th birthday is a voter registration card. And so I get all of that in terms of being frustrated. But the reality is there was a previous generation that was frustrated. And they didn't sit here and say, well, woe is me. They said, no, you're not going to stop me from actually voting. And what I'm saying is when you look at the numbers, large numbers, but not maximizing the power. Same thing with Latinos. You got 2.1 million eligible but unregistered Latinos in this country. And again, what is it going to take to get folks who are 18 to 29 to realize they have to use that power? What would you say to them?
I would say that it really comes down to the gravity of it all, and I say that because...
You lower that a little bit. There you go. Go ahead.
Thank you. It comes down to the gravity of it all. There needs to be a point where we recognize that even our grandparents' generation fought for this right, and it's not anything for us to turn around from it. The other thing that we have to look at is that we shouldn't be discouraged because these numbers actually do matter. I think one of the points that have been made over and over again is about voter suppression. But if our votes didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard to suppress it. I mean, even look at the Alabama Senate race where it was against Doug Jones versus Roy Moore.
Yep.
Remember that? Now, see, it was a large turnout of black women. I think it was 96%, which turned that state blue. And it comes down to a point where
also, large percentage of black men, too, about 92%.
See? And it comes down to a point like that where we have to realize that this vote actually does matter. If it didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard to suppress it from us.
So earlier, State Senator Rodney Ellis, I think we have an issue with that, Mike. I can take it right there. So earlier, State Senator Rodney Ellis, he made a point that he said that if you're a young person, understand. He said, why should you vote? Because Sandra Bland can't. I've often said Trayvon Martin can't vote, but you can. Rakia Boyd can't vote. Jordan Davis can't vote, but you can. And so to me, that's also the kind of messaging that's needed.
I would definitely say I agree 100%. And one thing that I've noticed, especially with this recent midterm election, is that I've been encouraging some of my peers to actually know what they're voting for, because oftentimes we also hear you just need to vote. Somebody fought for you to vote, somebody died for you to vote, but no one knows how to vote educatedly. Like, they don't know exactly what they're voting for. They just know that it's important. So one thing that I've really been pushing, especially in this midterm election, is know who you're voting for. Know who's running for what race. I know a lot of people, especially in my class just yesterday, didn't even know that there are 3 people who are running for the Texas Senate right now. Have no idea that was happening. They only know about, Beto and Ted Cruz, but we have to be more encouraging, especially millennials encouraging each other to actually make an educated vote as well.
All right, you got 4 days, and so what are you going to tell the lazy folks on this campus who's saying, I'm good, I'm not going to really worry about that? What do you say to them?
I'm going to say that it is your civic duty to vote, and also because of this right to vote, it can obviously be taken away if you give into the wrong hands. So because of that reason alone, you should get out and you should vote so you can still have it.
I think y'all too nice. Y'all gotta say, get your lazy ass up and vote.
I've been dragging people. So if I'm like, if you haven't registered, if I got to strap you to my back to take you to go and vote, we're gonna make sure that it happens.
Well, but also the commissioner, former state senator Rodney Ellis, he also said that, of course, you know, it doesn't tell you who you voted for, but in Texas, you're able to actually list who voted and who didn't. He said that he said y'all should get the names of every student on this campus and put it in the school newspaper of the folks who did not vote. I think that's a good idea.
I definitely think it might work.
All right, I'm gonna lead y'all to that. So yeah, I'm gonna lead y'all to that. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, we talk about this whole idea of voting, and of course, we've said how impactful voter suppression is, and so can Republicans actually make an argument that is appealing to black folks? Demetrius Minor, he is the coalitions director for the Americans for Prosperity Florida, author of Preservation and Purpose: The Making of a Young Millennial and a Manifesto for Faith, Family, and Politics. And so, Demetrius, what about that? Because last week, Young Conservative Summit they had, all these young black folks were there, and they all what they doing is just yelling, hollering, screaming, talking about, oh, what Democrats haven't done. And I said, fine, what's your agenda? You haven't said anything to me that makes it appealing as to why you should get somebody black to vote. And I also say, Demetrius, that as long as Republicans keep being scared of black people, we ain't voting for them.
First of all, Roland, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come on your show. Greatly honored. When someone first enters into politics, the arena of politics, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of fervor, and there's a lot of energy. And at times, at least I can speak for myself on a personal basis, there is a tendency to latch onto personality over policy. But it's policy that's going to have the most direct influence on people's lives, especially on a state and local level. And I can provide 4 examples about that, Roland, here in the Sunshine State. In March, as I was lobbying on behalf of Americans for Prosperity in Tallahassee, the state capital of Florida, I was lobbying for a free speech bill, free speech on college campus bill. And a person who was very vital in helping that bill, the passage of that bill, become successful was Representative Kim Daniels, a conservative blue dog black woman who was a Democrat in the state of Florida. And so that just goes to show you the power and the sensuality of reaching across the aisle. Here, I reside in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is right outside of Tampa. We've partnered with the Hillsborough County NAACP, which is the largest chapter of the NAACP in the state of Florida, to come against a transportation tax that will not benefit the poor, that will hurt minorities the most. It's a regressive tax. The NAACP feels that its constituents have been slighted, that they have been ignored, and that the group that's pushing this transportation tax is pushing it without asking for their input. So we've partnered with them in calling for voters to vote against this referendum come Tuesday. A third example, Roland,
but
is
Demetrius,
that...
here's the question. But here's the question, though. Here's the question. I'm talking about Republican candidates who are white. And the question is this. Do they have the guts to go into black communities, to actually sit with black people and ask them, what are the things that you care about? I have had this discussion over the years with Michael Steele, with J.C. Watts, with Elroy Saylor, with Michael Williams. I mean, a whole host of people. And the reality is this here. Whenever elections come around, Republicans go, we're not going to get black votes, so we're just going to go focus on our voters. But then they complain about black people who vote Democrat, and then they always say, oh, Democrats take you for granted. But it's very simple. If one party largely ignores you, then you're not going to even consider that particular person as a black Republican. Do you also face those issues in trying to explain to white Republicans, look, if you ignore black folks, they're not going to vote for you?
Well, sure, you're absolutely right. But I just gave you some examples of what we've done early on through the year, throughout the state legislature, working with elected officials, of how we have partnered for conservative causes with black individuals, going to where black people are, representing their constituency. I definitely can't speak, or neither will I be held accountable for what people do in various states. But here in the state of Florida, we have put a concrete effort in articulating our principles, our values, and our mission and vision to those who traditionally are not aligned with us.
So is Ron DeSantis doing that against Andrew Gillum?
Ron DeSantis, just like Andrew Gillum, is out there campaigning and vying for every single vote. Let me put this disclaimer out there. As a member of Americans for Prosperity, we're nonpartisan, so we don't reflect either party.
No. I'm not. No. But I'm asking you. But you're in Florida. You're in Florida, and you're a black Republican. Sure. And so this is not. But I'm asking: is Ron DeSantis actually specifically targeting and campaigning for African American votes? Is he holding events in black communities? Is he sitting down with black people?
Sure. I know many black Republicans who will be voting for Ron DeSantis. Now, ultimately, it's going to be up to the whole state of Florida as a whole to determine who's going to be the next governor.
Gotcha. Well, here again, this is the issue that I would say, and then I want you to get your final comment. As long as Republicans continue to push issues like voter suppression, that is going to be the biggest barrier to black people even remotely considering voting for a Republican. Because as Common said in the song Gloria, freedom is like a religion to us. And when you are making it harder for folks to vote, that never sits well with black folks. And look, even the commission, Rick Scott, the people who are formerly incarcerated, where he had this commission, they only meet 4 times a year, and they rarely grant anybody their voting rights back. I mean, that panel was an embarrassment and indicative of, again, how some people strongly believe Republicans don't give a damn about people of color. Your final comment.
My final comment, Roland, is that, we can pay attention to the hysteria and the noise and what the media says, but it's policy. Again, on a state and a local level.
Voter suppression is policy.
Again, it's policy. For example, black people care about jobs and the economy. Black people care about their budget, their paycheck. Black people care about your freedom. You said it so eloquently. And that's why we pass free speech on college campuses with the help of a black Democrat lawmaker. So we're not just in a box of one issues, but there's a diversity of issues, a plethora of issues and causes.
But Demetrius, will you agree? But Demetrius, will you agree that as long as Republicans continue with voter suppression efforts, that is going to prevent black folks from even considering what they have to say on all the other things you just talked about? It's a barrier.
Roland, I'm a black conservative, and obviously I'm against voter suppression. However, look, I have to have an ID if I wanted to go see a rated R movie, if I wanted to check out a book from a library. I do believe that this
It's not just ID, Demetrius. Demetrius,
there's a narrative.
It's not just an Demetrius. It's not just an ID, Demetrius. We know for a fact in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, how they made it very difficult to say not only is it an ID, that if you don't have one, you have to travel to an office, sign an affidavit to say you don't have an ID. Go back home, wait for them to certify that to come back and pick up your ID. If you are elderly, if you're young, you're not going to an office 2 or 3 times. We know also in North Carolina where they specifically cut out early voting locations to keep folks from voting in the early elections. The federal court said they were targeting black folks. So again, you can make the argument about it's about an ID. I'm in Texas, my home state, where you can vote with a gun license, but you can't vote with a student ID from a state university, which is a state-issued ID. That was done by purpose, and 600,000 people of color were disenfranchised. 5 federal judges ruled against Texas as a result. The Obama administration sided with the plaintiffs. The Trump administration sided with Texas. And the Supreme Court, the conservative Supreme Court, went along with Texas. But again, you keep saying it's just about an ID. If you're in Alabama and you're closing down driver's licenses offices, you can't get the same ID. You look at what's happening in Kansas, where Chris Kobach, there's one early voting location in a town, 13,000 people, largely Hispanic, 61%. They moved the polling location a mile out from the town with no bus stop. Come on, man. You can't tell me that wasn't done on purpose.
Roland, I came here to speak on behalf of the state of Florida, and I will tell you what's happened with early voting as far as poll locations.
I can talk about purging of votes in Florida, but go ahead.
Roland, I went to an early voting polling location that was a little bit further than where I would have to go if I decided to vote on Tuesday. However, I had no problem whatsoever. I had no issue whatsoever when I registered to vote. In providing the documentation that was needed. So this narrative that Black people can't do whatever it takes to get an ID or to get identification, I think is false. No,
Demetrius,
I think you and I would just have to disagree on that one.
Well, Demetrius, here's the deal, though. There ain't just Black people, because even in Wisconsin, where the Obama administration allowed their voter ID to go forward, a federal judge called in Governor Scott Walker and said, "Why are you dragging your feet on the issuing of voter IDs?" It impacted more than 200,000 people in the state of Wisconsin. And so, look, we keep saying, well, we should be able to get an ID. It's not just the issue of an ID. It's also what type of ID, and then, of course, the games they play. And last one, Demetrius, and again, here's the issue I have. When they say, oh, no, you can't get a birth certificate from the Bureau of Vital Stats. You got to get a birth certificate with the raised seal. Come on, man. We know that game. But, Demetrius, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. We'll have you back on. We'll see what happens in Florida, and we'll see how Ron DeSantis does with Black voters in Florida. Thanks a bunch.
Sure. Hey, thank you for having me.
I want to quickly go to my panel here. Dorian, before you go, I know you want to comment. Go right ahead.
Listen, we've heard these arguments about, you need a voter identification to board a plane or to check out a library book. We've heard this for the past 15 years. The fact of the matter is, boarding a plane or getting a book from the library isn't a constitutional right. It's not a right that's secured by the laws and the case law of our country, right? Like this, the right to vote is so precious that in constitutional case law has been referred to as so precious that it secures all the other rights. So it is the fundamental right. And Demetrius said something else. He said, the idea that Black people aren't willing to do whatever it takes to get identification or to vote. Why are we always put in a position where we have to do whatever it takes to exercise something that we are due as a people, as citizens of this country? I mean, he's taking his privilege into account as well. I mean, he probably has access to a motor vehicle, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of us don't have access to motor vehicles, and we have to rely on public transportation and loose job schedules to get to the polls on Election Day. So why don't states take the opposite approach, like Oregon, where they register people automatically to vote, and you have to opt out of the right to vote if you don't want to vote? We should be making easier, not harder to vote. It's ridiculous. And I hear this stuff every week, day in and day out, about how it's so easy to cast a ballot. And if Black people just, exercise a little gumption, a little moxie, then we'll be able to vote. But that's not the case, because we hear about it every day in the Election Protection Hotline, 1-866-RVOTE. If you have problems on Election Day, give us a call. We'll help you get to the bottom of those issues.
Roland.
All right, Dorian, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Cleo, go ahead with your comment. Then I'm going to Brandon before I go to my next topic. Go ahead.
Recently, I'm sure you know by now, Kemp backed out of a debate with Abrams. And I'm sure Jeff Sessions still has nightmares about his interaction with Kamala Harris. And my point to you was that these Republicans have other strategies other than confronting Black people directly. They get Kanye, they get other people to do their work to make Black people have some appeal, or make the Republican Party have some appeal to Black people by doing strategic, manipulative things. And overall, they're not interested in having this direct interaction that you keep asking about with Black people. They rather do the strategic, manipulative thing that they do to make sure that they have an optical impression that make you consider voting for them. When Kanye was being confronted or addressed by the president, that had an impact. Then, as you know, Trump followed up with bringing about 400 young people, you were there, to the White House to create this optical illusion of Black support. Trump's optical illusions have worked for him, not directly confronting Black people. As you always say, he has yet to talk to the Black press or surround themselves in a situation with Black people that he does not control. They're not going to do it because they, like I said, what happened with Jeff Sessions, with Kamala Harris, that's one of their nightmares, that they're going to be confronted and actually be responsible, and they won't be able to. So I don't know if you're going to get what you want if you expect these white Republicans to actually be in a meaningful dialogue with black folks. They rather scheme and strategize.
Brandon, your comment,
Yeah,
please.
there's 2 points I can get through. First off, you know, we agree on a lot of things, but I disagree with you when you try to paint with a broad stroke the Republican Party. You're talking about white Republicans and interacting with the black community. Just 2 examples real quickly. John Kasich from my birth state of Ohio got 1 out of 4 black voters to vote for him back 2010. Larry Hogan up on the ballot this year.
And that's one guy.
Let me finish. Roland, let me get my point across. You
there
surely
are
have a chance to
31
respond.
Republican governors.
All right,
that's
Roland,
one.
All I said again was that when you paint with the broad stroke, if you want to sit here for the next hour and go down and list a lot of other ones, Larry Hogan in my state currently of Maryland, running right now, the latest poll.
That's 2.
Hold up, let me finish. The latest
That's
poll by
2
the
out of
Afro
31.
newspaper. The latest poll by the Afro newspaper shows him with a 65% approval rating from black Marylanders. So all I was pointing out
Brandon,
is that when you paint with
that's
the broad
2
stroke,
out of
that
31.
Republicans- Okay, want me to keep going down the list? I will. But Roland, all I'm saying again is that when you paint with a broad stroke,
Brandon,
the Republican Party, you're doing
you
a disservice
stopped
to your
that
viewers.
too.
Secondly, to the second point.
Brandon, you stopped that too.
Want me? Okay. On my second point about
Brandon, you stopped that too.
What? To what?
Go ahead.
To white
okay. So again,
go ahead, finish your second point, but go ahead.
Second point.
You keep saying I paint with a broad brush.
Second point
yeah, because it's broadly
was
true.
About voter registration statistics. The Pew Research Center, which I know you all agree on here, is not a right-wing organization at all. It actually leans a little bit to the left. The Pew Research Center did a research on voter registration in this country and found that 1 out of 8 voter registration forms in this country are inaccurate or out of date. That's 24 million, 1 out of 8. They found that there are 1.8 million deceased people on the rolls currently, and that 2.75 million people are registered in 2 states. So I bring that up only to point to the fact, as the gentleman from the American Prosperity is talking about, that the need for voter ID is not an attempt at some imaginary problem.
Brent, I'm going to stop you right there, brother.
It is an issue that is being addressed right there. You can look at Canada, other countries as well, that do
how
have
many
voter IDs.
instances do we have of in-person voter fraud?
You always like to point to
over the past 15
other countries
years,
when
Brandon.
it comes to healthcare or Europe. If you don't want to talk about voter ID.
Instances do we have of in-person voter fraud, Brandon?
Again, to
how
your
many
point.
instances?
Okay, to your point.
Do we have of in-person
and
voter
I've talked
fraud?
about this before, and if you let me get to your point, how do you investigate a crime first dictates how many that come out. There's been over 1,000 of them that I can list. If you give me time, I'll pull up the website and go through them. But again, if you're not investigating it or don't have protocols in place to catch it.
There are protocols,
how do you
Brandon.
Catch it? No, how do you
it's
catch
under state law. You just graduated law school. You know that, right?
I work on campaigns, and I graduated law school, and I work as a campaign manager.
Okay.
Have you worked on a campaign before as paid staff?
Absolutely not, but I am an attorney, and I have looked into this. Now, so let me know how many. Let's go to our birth state of Ohio.
Your point about
how many instances of in-person voter fraud have you seen?
Okay, hold on. I'm a referee. Dorian, ask your question, and then go Brandon.
Yes, your question.
Let's limit it to the state of Ohio. That is our birth state. We went to the same high school, actually.
Okay.
How many instances of in-person voter fraud have you seen over the past 15 years out of the state of Ohio?
So 2 things again. I don't live in Ohio. I've been living for 12 years. I live in Maryland, so I cannot speak to that.
Let's go to Maryland. I used to live in Maryland, too.
Let me go back. Let me answer your question, but I'm not going to answer how you want to answer, but I'm going to answer the question. I heard your question. Here's my answer. I've worked as campaign managers for campaigns on the front lines, Democrats and Republicans. How do you tell if somebody's coming to the polls on, as I pointed to, 1 out of 8 registrations in this country, the Pew Research Center has found to be inaccurate?
Okay.
How do you find that how do you prevent them from voting? There is no system if you're not checking IDs as they didn't do in Ohio for a long time.
Brandon, excuse me, I'm sorry. Dorian,
no way to find out.
Dorian, you got 30 seconds to respond.
I'll take 15.
I'm bored.
The fact of the matter is it's a voter identification is a remedy for a sickness that does not exist. It is a voter suppression tactic because the more hurdles you put in the way of people when they try to vote, the less likely they are to turn out. We've seen it time and time again. And the court case that you were referring to, Roland, earlier out of North Carolina was the NAACP's case. And the court found, excuse me, this is my 15 seconds, brother.
Okay, all right.
The fact of the matter is,
guys.
registrations are inaccurate according to a left-leaning organization. But
okay, all right. Brandon, Brandon, I've heard the same point 7 times. I don't need an 8th time.
Same as
I'm
your
good.
suppression
All right.
tactics.
One of the other issues that's important, of course, is criminal justice reform. We know what's happening in Florida. Step over here, please. There's a couple of guys I want to quickly interview before we go. Come on, step over. No, leave that. Bring it over here. Come on, step over. What's your name?
Danny Sneed.
All right, Dan.
Stephen Holloway.
And you guys are with?
We're with the Anthony Gray's Smart Justice Bureau project.
Okay, and what is that?
That's a course, a 12-week, 18-hour course aimed at using your lived experience to invoke policy change. I'm a formerly incarcerated person, spent 15 years in Texas Department of Correction, but I run a faith-based reentry program. So one of my ideas is to go to Austin, use my lived experience of how the faith-based program worked for me, to ask them to prioritize funding to support faith-based and community-based programs because it promotes public safety, and you change that person and make them be a productive member of the community.
Are you excited about what's happening in Florida, where that initiative is going to change the Constitution, is going to restore the voting rights of 1.4 million formerly incarcerated folks?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was never incarcerated, but I was affected by it because my father spent 30 years in TDC and received a 99-year sentence for a nonviolent crime. And nobody reached out to the family after that took place. And so I'm advocating on behalf of the Anthony Graves Smart Justice Speakers Bureau for families of the incarcerated, because statistics says that children of the incarcerated are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated themselves, and all of the stigma and all of the different things that happen to us once this takes place. But I survived the experience, I lived it, and now I'm providing social and emotional learning for those families who have parents incarcerated.
Right. How can folks get more on the bureau? Where can they go? What's the website?
Right now we're at on Twitter at hashtag Anthony Gray Smart Speakers Bureau, and also on Facebook.
Facebook, and also with Dr. Sabrina Walker on her Twitter account.
Okay. I want to ask one thing. If you are not on parole or probation and you was convicted of a felony and you went to prison and you're out now, you can vote. And that vote right was reinstated or established in 1997 under George Bush. For the last 21 years, if you're not on probation or parole, you can vote. So I'm asking my peers out there that are out and think you can't vote because you went to prison 5 or 10 years ago, you can vote. Get registered and vote.
All right. And also for the families of the incarcerated, get out and vote and support criminal justice reform.
And even if you can't vote, you can drive smile to the polls. All right, gentlemen, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. All right, folks, one last interview before I go. Where's Aaron Dallas? Come on. He's Student Government Association president. Come on, man. You got to move. Y'all, I don't understand these college students who move slow. It's like, man, you need some vitamins or something? No, I got it right here. That one got issues with that microphone there. And so Commissioner Ellis earlier said, I asked your other 2 students, Commissioner Ellis said earlier that y'all should publish the names of every student from TSU who's registered who did not vote. You should put it in the school newspaper and put it on the website.
Yeah, I mean, his comment earlier was definitely a true statement. I think that, just an election like this consequential, those who don't vote, I mean, we have to vote. And so SGA is going to continue our voting efforts, our voting initiatives. We registered over 2,000 students to vote this semester. Today we took over 300 students to the polls to vote. And next week we're going to continue our efforts on campus. We actually have a polling location on campus. It'll be at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, which is right down the road. So I think.
So the early voting location, not on campus, but a polling location is going to be at St. Luke's.
Yes, on November 6th, Election Day. Yep.
All right, then. Dog, whoop them into shape.
Yeah. Get out and vote.
I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch, man. Tell your mom and daddy what's up. Y'all, of course, I've known him since he was a kid, going to the same church, Brook Hollow Baptist Church in Houston. First of all, let me shout out, let me thank our panel. Of course, Dorian, Cleo, and Brandon back in there in D.C. And I was going to get to Donald Trump, Michael Cohen, talking about the racist comments Donald Trump made. But hell, that ain't no news. It's not like we shocked. Hell, we all knew that. And so that's called duh. Real quick here. Look who showed up. Get on over here. Y'all, this is Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis. Of course, I've been talking with him coming down here real quick. We're going over our time because you late. I told you to come here before 6 o'clock.
I was out
and then,
campaigning.
I was campaigning.
Yeah,
That's what I was doing.
Yeah, that's any black person's excuse right now over the next 4 days.
See, I'm just happy to see so many African Americans and Hispanics and right-thinking white people, South Asians, lined up around early voting places today. So I close at 7 that line. Seriously, I'm going to take you out, and we're going to go and encourage folks to stay there.
That ain't a problem. I got a call earlier this week because you got 19 black women who are running for judge positions here in Harris County, and they were concerned about low black voter turnout. So I called Rodney, and I said, look, I was supposed to go to New York. I'll cancel that trip. I said, I'll come down to Houston to try to help some folks out. So tomorrow, what are we doing tomorrow? Are we going knock on doors tomorrow?
Knock on doors and encourage people to vote. We're going to go by a couple of headquarters. We're going to encourage candidates to get out and work for the various candidates. And we're going to do a bicycle ride early in the morning.
Okay, we ain't doing that bicycle ride early in the morning. Because I already told him I ain't waking up that damn early.
Hey, I'm just glad you're here, man. This is home, and it's just good to have you. It's good you here at my alma mater, not your alma mater, my alma mater.
I mean, I can go to my alma mater, but I'm just, I mean, don't get special.
We're popular, but I'm not sure I want you going to your alma mater. Some of them might be a little confused on how they voting over there.
But they ain't gonna mess with me.
I know that. They love you, and we love you. Thank you for coming home.
I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. All right, folks, that is it. Broadcasting from here from Texas Southern University. Let me thank President Lane. Let me thank, of course, Serbina. Let me thank all the students. All right, y'all, come on around here. Come on. Let go of the camera. Go wide. Go wide on the camera. Go wide. All y'all, come on. All right, so y'all, here are students from the Texas Southern University School of Communications who I told you to go wide. Get over here. So these are all the students from TSU School of Communications who helped out with our broadcast. They shot the video earlier today. Trust me, I was taking them through the paces. I was yelling at them. You're right, they were moving a little slow.
They were moving really slow.
Right. They know to move a lot damn faster now. All right, y'all, coming up next is my conversation with actress Erica Ash. Talk about the importance of voting. You do not want to miss this discussion. We had a great conversation. Also, if you go to Be Woke Vote, go to the YouTube channel, Facebook page. You're going to see my interviews with Congresswoman Maxine Waters, with Chuck D, with Erica Alexander, Erica Ash, also Dr. Jim Lawson, and you'll also see the interview with Devon Franklin as well. And I'm missing somebody, but we'll put it all on my pages as well. And so again, folks, I'm going to see you Monday from Atlanta. I'll be broadcasting from Ebenezer Baptist Church on Monday. They're having a prayer rally, again, trying to get Stacey Abrams elected governor of Georgia. Okay, I was in my show by saying holla, so on 3, y'all got to say it. 1, 2, 3, holla!
World's smartest when it comes to politics. I'm the first to admit that. I'm not even the second or third, but I'm trying, and I think that that's really the message here. Get out and vote because it does matter. Your vote absolutely matters.
You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back. You can't hold us back.
Hey folks, Roland Martin here with BeWoke.vote. Well, of course, we're focused on 2018 midterm elections, trying to get you focused not just on the issues, but also on the importance of using the power you have to cast your ballot. Today, we'll be chatting with Erica Ash. She joins me right now, of course. You've seen her on television and in the movies, and normally she's the wild child, but today she gets to be a little bit more sedate, if you will, I think. What's happening?
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me.
All good. Well, first of all, so I say you broke out the proper attire.
You know, I tried, but I put a little spin on it. I put like a little ethnic spin on the flag.
Well, I think one of the things is that white folks don't understand. Our view of the flag, even when you talk about democracy, when you talk about voting, is totally different than theirs because it's a different perspective when you talk about freedom. And here we are, 399 years since the first 20-odd Africans arrived in the United States and Virginia, and we still are trying to get all of the rights that we're supposed to have.
Right. I mean, when you think about it, it's a bit hypocritical. I mean, they were creating this flag and creating all of these laws with people being excluded from the laws that they were actually creating. So all men were not included in that. So it was it's a weird hypocrisy when you think about it.
Well, I was just arguing with someone. Actually, it wasn't quite an argument because I smacked him down real quick. On Twitter.
Was this physically?
Nah, but I should have done it physically.
Oh,
I would have.
I'm glad you didn't.
I made the point about that we've had 114 Supreme Court justices in America. 108 have been white men. I said, if you want to understand the history of America,
100%.
right there, out of 114, 108 have been white men.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, things have been working out great. I said,
have they though?
Really? I was like, oh.
Was that when the smack happened? 'Cause that's when the smack would have happened for me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's when the tweet went to all of my followers, so therefore they can get in on the action when I'm busy.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you just want to let them have it. It's like kind of like the Beehive for Beyonce. Sometimes you just don't want to get your hands dirty. It's like, you know what, this is too easy. I'm gonna just let y'all have this.
Oh yeah, and they're very good at handling that.
I know they are.
But and again, it's a different perspective. Even when we talk about just this idea of voting, when you look at the efforts today with voter suppression, even the craziness with voter ID, people go, oh, but ID is simple. I'm like, yeah, but once you start going underneath, where you have to have a certain type of ID, we must see the birth certificate, it must be raised, it must be a certain paperweight. I mean, look, these are barriers that are put in place.
Can I just be quite frank with you? I think a lot of people end up not voting or being politically active because a lot of people just don't understand the terms. And I think what happens a lot of times, people don't want to admit that they don't understand what these terms mean. And people talk about it, they talk about the electorate and gubernatorial and blah, blah, blah. You might as well be saying Oshkosh, bagosh, blah, 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 because people just don't get it.
But they don't we haven't had real civics, though.
Right.
I mean, we haven't had real, I'm talking about honest civics.
Exactly.
Not that fake stuff that actually exists in the classroom.
Right, and even with the fake stuff that exists in the classroom, because I took that, even with the fake stuff, everything is glossed over. And then all of a sudden, you're supposed to know what everybody's talking about. And that's always been a problem for me, when I'm dealing with political conversations. I mostly listen. But when you're talking about actually taking action to change what's going on in the political climate, that's where you're arrested because you're just kind of like, well, I don't really know who to vote for because this person is speaking way over my head.
There was a sister in Fort Worth who served time in federal prison. She gets out. She votes. She doesn't realize that she lost her right to vote.
Right.
She gets prosecuted. She's sitting in a federal prison right now, not only for voter fraud, but also parole violation. So she's in there for 5 years. For simply casting a ballot. Now, we're going to spend an inordinate amount of dollars to lock her up for 5 years because she said, no one told me. And in fact, her probation officer testified that there was nothing, it wasn't like you got out and it was kind of like, oh, by the way, here's a sheet of paper, you can't vote.
Right.
She had no idea. 5 years she's sitting in federal prison right now in Texas.
And there are a lot of people, they don't know if they can. They don't know what to do, how to do it, where to do it. They get, all these documents and pamphlets in the mail, but they don't really understand how to dig through and figure it all out. So I think, the solution, because I'm all about solutions, is figuring out a way to reintroduce that into the school system. And I think, getting people together who are like-minded, right? If you don't know exactly what's happening, I think the first thing is don't be ashamed of that. Don't be ashamed to say, I don't really know what that means. I don't know what that term means. I don't know what this politician stands for. Even if everyone's talking about it, people are scared to get laughed at. Now, I'm the queen of no shame, as we know.
Yes, we know.
But I feel like a lot of people, like the ego gets in the way, right? And you don't want to be the one friend that looks stupid. I'm always looking stupid. But the thing is I'll ask questions. I'll say, you know what? I haven't watched TV this weekend. What happened? Talk to me. So my friends now know. They're like, oh, Erica's come out from under her rock now. Let me explain to her. But I have to do that because I wouldn't know what's going on otherwise because it really does get confusing. And I get like, it's overwhelming, and I get mind overload, and I just have to shut everything off.
Look, I have other friends who will send me a text and say, Roland, first they go, is this true?
Right.
And then it's, okay, what's the real deal with this? How major is it? And I'm kind of like, okay, boom, 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 hit them right back. They're like, okay, cool. They move on. And my deal is, I'm cool with that because for a lot of them, they want to be educated on, and they say, look, I trust you're going to give me the information, and then I can take it from there. Now, that's when you also got to have my stuff together because it can be running around quoting me going, now, Roland said, and then if it's crazy, like, that really didn't happen.
Exactly. Then your Twitter followers are going to let you have it. But that's the thing. I think everybody needs 3 friends. You need that one friend that's not going to make you feel stupid because you say you don't know. The one friend who does know everything and can spout it out. I mean, like, you know, like a Roland Martin Jr. And then you need that one friend to translate.
I make it easy. You don't need to translate.
Right, you do.
You need
You do. But you know those friends that's always like, oh yeah, well, the woman is and you're like, girl, I don't know what you're saying. Talk to me like I'm a 5th grader. Break it down to me in simplistic terms so I know exactly what you're saying and exactly what I'm going to do about it.
Okay, now somebody who's watching, they probably will say, oh no, that's not basic. What they don't realize is we, as a journalist, we are actually trained. Newspapers are written for 5th graders. That's not a joke. We literally are written. Al Newhart, of course, who was the founder of USA Today, used to be the CEO of Gannett, he used to always hate reading George Will with the Washington Post. He said, I don't ever want to have to read a newspaper and have a dictionary right next to me. He said, make it plain for the people. So one of the things that I've always done is utilize television and radio and also social media to teach folks. I never thought about it that way until about a month before she died, Dr. Maya Angelou, when she was being honored at the National Portrait Gallery. I did an interview with her and she said, you're a teacher. She said, I watch you. You actually teach. And I was kind of like, okay, I never thought about it that way. But the reality is, to your point, the average person doesn't know. The reality is there is no affirmative right to vote in this country. There isn't. It was specifically set up that way. People think, oh no, I have a right to vote. Actually, you don't. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says you have an absolute right to vote. There are constitutional amendments that say you as a woman and me as an African American can't be denied the right to vote.
Right.
But there's nothing that says, no, you absolutely have that right. We're going to probably have, in the midterm elections, more than half of the American population not cast a ballot.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But then I also have this other view where my deal is very simple. I use 2 versions. So I use one for mainstream television. I say vote or shut the hell up. But the other one really is vote or shut the fuck up.
Right.
Because I mean I can't because there's nothing worse for me than people who complain about a system. Because folks really don't understand that literally everything in our life is impacted by the ballot. There's nothing in our lives that isn't determined by politics some way or another.
Right.
If you were wearing something that was actually exported from another country, it had to go through a particular procedure that was established by government.
Right.
And that's also, I think, where people go, oh, no. That, none of that stuff matters anything in my life when, oh, yes, it does. It matters a hell of a whole lot.
Also, in terms of us having so many less people voting in this midterm elections, I think that can be shifted, even if it's just, a few percentage points by things like this.
Look,
us
that was
getting
a
together,
race.
us talking about it, because it's like double dutch. It's over. You're like, where do I jump in? How to jump in? You just try.
Right.
And even if you stop the ropes, you get back out and you try again. So
but it actually does matter. Right now, Republicans hold a 1-vote majority in the Virginia House of Delegates. And the only reason they hold that is because that was in the last election, that was a tie. It was decided by a coin flip.
Oh, wow.
They ended up the exact same number of votes.
Right.
And the coin flip, Republican wins the coin flip, keeps the seat, and otherwise the Democrats could have taken control of both chambers. A coin flip.
Right. Right.
So when somebody
and that
tells me
the complete face of everything after that.
My 1 vote is no big deal. Obama wins North Carolina by 14,000 votes in 2008. That literally, if you break it down, the number of precincts, 1 per precinct.
Right.
1 vote.
Right.
And folks go, oh, really? I'm going, yes.
Right.
You just don't understand how that can make the difference.
Yeah, it really, really does.
And also, I think when we look at a lot of these media institutions, they also are not talking about issues that folks actually care about. And I think that's also a huge deal. Are you talking about things that I care about and then putting it in a way where I understand how my life is impacted?
Right. And also the side of it that matters most to us. You could talk about the issues that are relevant to us, but you could skew it in a way that makes us sort of feel the way that you want us to feel about it. And that's what I think a lot of news outlets do as well. It's whatever the issue is, instead of making it plain, allowing us to make our own decision, or equally looking at both sides of it.
If you're Black or Latino, it's not like the other networks are doing a bang-up job, again, speaking to those issues that impact us in a much different way.
Right. Right.
First election you voted in, what was it?
Gosh. Do you want me to be completely honest?
No, I want you to lie. Yes.
Obama.
That was the first one? So that wasn't the first one you were eligible for.
Right.
So after 2008, did you then look at other elections, or did you only vote in president?
No, I started voting from there, and so I would do the midterms, and I would do the, I did start voting from that point on. I didn't vote in every single election from that point on, but I did start voting more regularly.
Growing up, was that a part of your upbringing?
No, it was not. I mean, religion was huge in my family. Education was huge in my family.
So y'all went,
Politics
so
was not.
you had to go to church.
Listen, we had to go to church, Sunday school, Bible study. We did everything church-based because both my parents were preachers.
Hold on. So both of your parents are preachers. So when they had souls to the polls.
Wait, not in my church.
Really?
I mean, we would have the odd candidate come to a service, but my church growing up wasn't very, politics meets religion heavy. I see that a lot now in my church that I go to now. Like, I mean, the politicians will come out on that one odd Sunday right before elections.
Oh yeah, they'll be there.
Oh, they know Jesus then. So I see it all the time now. But when I was growing up, no, that wasn't a big part of our upgrade.
So you think that's also an answer? Because earlier you
100%.
said put it in the schools, but also I do believe, for me, the reason I see the value, so my parents worked elections. They volunteered for campaigns. They ran phone banks. That was a huge part of my upbringing.
And look at you now. And it's very interesting because I think that might be even bigger than the civics piece in schools. I mean, I think that at this point, having that in schools at least gives the children the opportunity to go home and ask their parents, so Mom, Dad, what is this? What do you think we should do about this? This is what I learned in school today. Let's talk about it. At least gives the children something to bring home and start a conversation with. However, if the parents start that for the children, then, then the children can go to school and say, hey, why am I not learning this here? Why don't I have a civics class? You know what I mean? And we'll have more Roland Martins running around here. I mean, the way that you were raised, the fact that your parents took you to the polls, the fact that they did not make it a choice for you, they actually exposed you to that in a way.
Then my dad watched about 5 hours of news a day. And I use this in speeches all the time, the importance of being aware of those things.
My parents were very, very concerned with making sure that we were well-rounded, but that's just not something that they were very exposed to. Which
is why connecting the dots matter. Because
exactly.
Because the thing is, you can't just take off that election because you say, I don't like either candidate, and people get caught up in this whole thing of, well, the lesser of two evils. Here's the reality. Somebody is going to win.
Right.
One or the other.
Right.
You better make a decision. Okay, I don't like neither one, but I like that one a lot less than that one.
Right.
You gotta make that call.
Absolutely.
And not act as if it doesn't matter.
I think, again, going back to my 3 friends, finding people who are like-minded, finding people that you actually connect with, people who find the same things important that you find important, people whose conversations you enjoy having, right? So because of friendships like yours, that's what made me figure out that my vote did matter and that it was important for me to vote and get out there, even if I wasn't doing everything, perfectly, just trying and then learning from the mistakes, whatever mistakes that I made, and trying again and getting better the next time that I went out to vote or to speak about something, political. That's the start. That's the way that we do it, because we can't go back and undo, like I can't go back in time and make myself be at the polls when I wasn't. So that's where the civic piece comes in. But I can start now. And that's what, I started when I started. And now I'm a part of more, political drives to get other people to vote. I'm not the world's smartest when it comes to politics. I'm the first to admit that. I'm not even the second or third. But I'm trying, and I think that's really the message here, Get out and vote because it does matter. Your vote absolutely matters.
Erica Ash, thank you so very much. Again, folks, use your power. But most importantly, Election Day is the end of one process. What happens the day after the election is the beginning of another. We need you engaged, we need you involved, we need you informed. register, vote, and then make sure the folks who you voted for do what they say they were going to do, because you are still a constituent. So silly.
Be like me. Be woke. Vote.